Okay. Hello everyone from wherever you're joining us from today. Thank you so much for joining us. And my name is Dr. Abubakar Isa. I welcome you all to Pulus Africa online training. I promise it's going to be a very good learning experience for all of us. I can see we're having a lot of people joining right now. We have people from Amatijani cluster at Ungwandosa. Thank you so much for joining us. From Blossom Light Cluster, thank you for joining us. While we wait for others to join as well, we're going to be discussing the basic principles of poultry farming. Just to give you an insight, I know most of us have had this experience, but probably we might be missing out on one or two things. I hope you can all hear me. I need a response from the comment section if you can hear me. Thank you so much for joining us from Ungwandosa cluster, from Nasarawa. Thank you so much. Daniel Zachary from Nasarawa, thank you for joining us. So we're going to be having a discussion from the scratch. We're going to be talking about the necessary things you're supposed to actually do from the beginning if you're to bring in birds. So we're going to be talking about the basic principles of poultry farming. I'm very happy to see all of you joining us this evening. Uh, this is one of our ways to keep in touch with our farmers through trainings like this, and we're going to be having trainings like this from time to time to keep our farmers abreast of the best practices and also to sharpen their brains uh, on the best practices so they can be able to maximize profit. I know we all know that it's really tough in the poultry industry right now. The cost of feed is difficult. The cost of day-old chicks keep fluctuating. It goes up and down. So this is the best time for you to actually try to find best methods to ensure that you avoid any form of loss, which will help you also to maximize profit. So thank you so much for joining us on this training today. Let's just wait for a couple of minutes for others to join as well before we can proceed. Thank you so much for joining us from NEPA Feed Cluster, Rumi. Thank you so much for joining us. I would also like to inform all our members to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're also on, we have WhatsApp groups for all the clusters on WhatsApp. If you're not in any of those groups and you're a cluster member, kindly reach out to your cluster leader so you can join your WhatsApp group on WhatsApp. So on all these platforms, we're also on Instagram as well. Like I mentioned, we're on LinkedIn as well. We post content for you to benefit from, which would also help you. So kindly follow us on all of these platforms. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be starting shortly. Let's just give it some time to wait for others to join in. Thank you, Madam Diana from Goningora. Thank you for joining us this evening. One of our very active cluster leaders. Thank you for joining us this evening. So like I rightly said, it is very critical to attend trainings like this because it will help you to understand better ways to actually maximize profit. Let me give you a scenario. Sometimes if you raise a carton of chicks, 50 birds, you might make probably 10,000 or 15,000 profit, but don't think that is where it stops. You can be able to make more. Probably you had some challenges, or probably you were not able to maximize the benefits that you're supposed to get from feeding them. So that is one of the reasons why we actually have trainings like this. So you understand the best practices, which would help you to improve your profit margin. So that you can be able to remain sustainable in the business. Our interest is to make sure that you continue this business, and that is why we're offering solutions to all of the problems that most of our small scale poultry farmers are having. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. I think we'll be starting soon. Like I already mentioned, this trading is going to be happening once every month, and the next one is going to be coming up on the 31st of this month. So we'll be expecting you to join us, and kindly also pass this information to all your cluster members. Please, I would like to see people mentioning their clusters in the comment section. And if you are joining us and you don't belong to any cluster, you can just check one of those clusters that has been mentioned, the area, if you're close to any of them, so that you can be able to join a cluster today and benefit from all of our activities. Thank you very much. So I think we can go straight right into it. I'll be sharing my screen. Thank you so much, Aisha from Zaria. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right. Can you all can you all see my screen? Please, I need a response from the comment section. I want to know you can see my screen. Thank you so much. So let's just go uh, straight into it. So like I mentioned, we'll be having a discussion about the best practices in poultry farming. And we're going to start from the beginning. I know most of us might already have experience, poultry experience, and then I would want us to give a proper attention to some of the things we'll be discussing. When you're ready, when you have a pen ready for a production cycle, what are the things you're supposed to actually look at? What are the things you're supposed to look into to ensure that you actually do have a very wonderful production cycle? Like I do rightly mention, the foundation is key. If you do not start well, it actually tends to affect the entire cycle in the long run. So it is very important that we start properly. It's very important that the beginning of every cycle is well prepared for, and also you continue with this effort till the end. So the first part is going to be preparations before arrival. What are the things you're supposed to do before your birds actually gets to you, before you even book with your vendor? One of those things is to ensure that you prepare your pen or you prepare your cage, and you're supposed to do go through a cleaning process. And this cleaning process, I always divide it into three sections. You're supposed to do what we call a wet cleaning, sorry, a dry cleaning, then a wet cleaning, then the disinfection part. Dry cleaning is the part where you're supposed to use cleaning materials to sweep the entire pen. And also, this is the part where you're supposed to scrape out all the dried stool from the previous batch. You know, when you just finish a batch, you will realize that it's either in the cage or inside the pen, you have some dry fecal materials, you have some of the dried manure. So you have to actually scrape out everything. And this is part of the one of the most important aspects of the dry cleaning. So it is very critical that you scrape out everything on the floor, on the cage, and also on the walls of your poultry pen. So when you finish this part, after scraping all, you're supposed to sweep out everything. Also ensure that during dry cleaning, you dust all your net, because we realize that sometimes farmers would tend to ignore this part. They feel like, oh, it's just the net, and then since breeze is just passing through, sometimes there are some certain fecal materials that hang around the net. So you're supposed to dust the net. You're supposed to remove cobwebs. This is also the time to do one or two patching of the floor. Probably sometimes you realize that maybe there's a hole, there's maybe a part of the pen or of the cage that's having an opening where probably rodents like rats can pass through. This is the time you're supposed to get cement or call a carpenter to actually fix those holes for you, because we know that when rats actually start entering. Okay, thank you so much. I'm very happy to get that feedback that you can hear me. You know, rats are carriers of so many types of infections, and they can actually cause a debilitating effect to your bird. So it is very critical that you patch all these holes during this period of dry cleaning. So when you remove all this dry fecal material, you dust your net. This time also is very critical. We know that we're in rainy season right now. This is the time you're also supposed to check your roofing. Is it leaking? If it is leaking, try to fix it, because we know the effect. We know the negative effect of that when you actually stock your best and then your pen start leaking. This is also the time you're supposed to fix, you know, all these coverings we have around your pen that you always bring down when rain is falling. Sometimes you realize that it is torn, it is not actually covering properly. You don't wait for emergency cases. This is the time you're also supposed to fix those coverings that you use for your cage or for your pen that you roll down whenever it is raining. So it is critical that during this dry period you fix all of these things. So because poultry production is a step-by-step thing, you have to take it step by step, and you have to actually ensure that you do all of these things at the right time. So when you fix all of this and you're able to finish up your dry cleaning process, which means you have dust everywhere, you have removed cobwebs, you have actually scraped out all the dried fecal matter, all the dry fecal material from your previous batch. You have also fixed all the holes, and your coverings have also been fixed. The next step is for you to do a wet cleaning. The wet cleaning is for you to mix a detergent with hypo in water, and then you wash the entire pen or the cage. This washing is supposed to be done properly. You know, sometimes after scraping out this dry manure, you realize that you need to wash it off. So when you are washing it off, make sure that you scrub the floor properly so that it comes out clean. You also have to extend this washing to the walls as well. So when you wash all of these areas, you also have to make sure that the walls, because sometimes you realize that the birds actually drop some of their feces on the walls, and then you have to actually ensure that you wash out all the materials that you're actually seeing on the walls. So after this washing, which is the wet cleaning, which you're supposed to use water and detergent, and also it is also helpful if you mix this water with hypo, like I already mentioned. Then the next stage is for you to go into the disinfection stage. Disinfection is very, very critical, and this is one area that sometimes I've heard farmers saying, doctor, I use potash to do my disinfection. Please do not use potash to do. Potash is not a disinfectant. Sometimes some people will say, doctor, I use salt to do disinfection. Please do not use salt to do disinfection. You're supposed to use a disinfectant, which is a special chemical that wipe away all microorganisms that can cause disease that are left in your farm, inside the pen and the environment. So you cannot use potash, because potash and salt does not have that power to actually wipe away these microorganisms. And it is very necessary to use a broad spectrum disinfectant, because sometimes you don't know the kind of organisms, that kind of harmful microorganisms that are in your environment. So sometimes some people will say, I've been using potash and it has been working for me. It is not working for you. You have only been lucky. So please, let's try to do the right thing, to use a very, very good disinfectant. An example of this disinfectant is Mordigard Lysol. We also have Vinco Quartz. We also have Vinco Kill. We also have formaldehyde, the one we know as formalin. All these are examples of disinfectant. When you go to a veterinary store and you ask for a broad spectrum disinfectant, they will actually give you one. So, and one of the reasons why that will determine the kind of disinfection you're supposed to do is also one, if you are using a fresh pen, probably you have not used this pen before, you can easily use a disinfectant, and you either spray. If you have a sprayer, or you mix it in water and then you pour it on all the surfaces in your pen or in your cage, and you allow it to dry on those surfaces. Now, if you are using a fresh space, for instance, your cage is new, you can do this disinfection once, which is going to be okay. But if your cage is not new or your pen is not new, you have to do this disinfection at least 2 times. When you do the first one, you allow it to rest for at least 24 hours before you do the second one. Now, the third thing is you have to consider if you had a problem in your previous batch. For instance, if you had a disease outbreak in your previous batch, you have to do a very, very, very strong disinfection, because that problem you had, the infection might, the causative agent, which is the organism that caused that problem previously, might still be around, in your farm, still hanging around, so that when you bring your next batch, it will attack as well. So what you are supposed to do, if you have had a problem in your previous batch, you're supposed to actually do a very, very proper disinfection using one of those disinfectants that I already mentioned. One of it is formalin or Morigard Lysol, like I told you. You're supposed to do disinfection 3 times. You wash and disinfect appropriately 3 times. When you wash the first time, you allow the house to rest for at least 3 days before you disinfect again, and then you allow it to rest for 3 days before you disinfect for the third time. This will give you a chance to actually wipe out all the infectious organisms that are in that pen or in that cage that caused you that trouble previously. Because if you don't do this, you might see that after removing that batch, when you bring in the next batch, you will start having the same issue again. Now, after disinfection, like I told you, you can either spray using a spraying can, or you mix the disinfectant in water and then you pour it on the surfaces and allow it to dry. Now, when you're done with that, next thing, you're supposed to bring the beddings for your pen. And most times, we always advise farmers that ensure that uh, you use the appropriate beddings, because if you don't do that, sometimes people use sawdust, and you can hear from the name sawdust, it is actually dusty, and this can actually bring about some harmful effect to your beds. So the best is to use wood shavings. Wood shavings is also slightly dusty, but it is not as dusty as what is it called, sawdust or rice chaff. Sometimes some people use rice chaff. We have two types of rice chaff. We have the very smooth one. We also have the one that is not very smooth. The one that is very smooth is also very, very dusty. If you use this directly for your birds, sometimes you will discover that they will come down with respiratory problem. They will start coughing or they will start sneezing. And we know that some of these respiratory problems might be very difficult to actually manage, especially when it start affecting birds early like that. So when you bring in your wood shavings, like I told you, it is the best material to use for your bedding is wood shavings. Wood shaving is that one that is bigger, and you see that it is curly, and it is also bigger than the sawdust. And sometimes one of the harmful effect of using sawdust is if you use it, you realize that your birds might mistaken it for feed, and they'll start picking it and they'll start eating it. So when you bring in your wood shavings, you're supposed to keep it outside, and then you spray it with a disinfectant and turn it over and over again. This process will help you to disinfect the wood shavings. It will also help you to actually reduce the dust that is also inside, the little dust that you can find inside this wood shavings. So what you do, you can be turning it over and over and be spraying it with any of this disinfectant. Then when you are done, you allow it to dry, because you cannot take it inside your pen while it is wet. I hope we are following. Please, I need a response from the comment section. Are you following? Are we following what we're discussing? I'm taking it step by step so that we can understand how we're supposed to be carrying out these activities. So, like I said, when you bring in your wood shavings, you're supposed to actually turn it. As you're turning it, you're reducing the dust inside, and you are also disinfecting it to reduce any form of harmful microorganisms that might be inside. Now, after that, you can now, after drying it, you can now spread these wood shavings inside your pen. Now, after spraying these wood shavings, you are now supposed to look for newspaper. You can see in the diagram here that we have, you're supposed to get newspaper or carton and then spread them on top of these wood shavings that you have already spread. And one other thing I want to remind us is, please make sure when you are spreading your wood shavings, you don't spread it too thin, because I have seen from many of our farmers, I don't know, probably they're trying to manage wood shavings or not, they spread their beddings too thin. Sometimes you'll be seeing the floor, the cemented floor. That is not appropriate, because it does not give you the ideal benefit of using the bedding in the first place. So it doesn't help you in your poultry activity at all. So make sure that your bedding that that you are spreading, which is the wood shavings, like I told you, it is not too thin, such a way that you are not seeing the floor. You are only seeing the wood shavings before you now place your newspaper, as you can see in this image here, or a carton for in other cases. Some people might say they couldn't get newspaper, but you can also use carton as well. There's also a paper you can buy from veterinary store. We call it brooding paper. When you get it, it also looks like newspaper. You can also spread it on top of that wood shavings. Now, also ensure when you book your beds, you call your vendor to confirm, because sometimes you might book beds and then you call the vendor. Probably on the day you're supposed to pick up, you discover that your beds did not arrive. So you're supposed to call your vendor a day or two before to confirm that if you're actually going to get your beds or not. So that is how you're supposed to actually prepare your pen briefly. And then after this, one very key thing you're supposed to also look at is breed selection. What type of bed are you supposed to actually book? And this is very critical, because we have different breeds of broiler. We have about four of them, and each of them have different characteristics. And then people have different interests. There are people who raise beds for 2 weeks. There are people who raise beds for 4 weeks. There are people who raise beds for 5 weeks. So, and there are also people who raise beds for 6 or 8 weeks, because some of these birds have different characteristics based on their growth pattern. They also have different characteristics based on their adaptability to environmental factors. Some can actually adapt to heat periods. Some can actually also adapt better to cold season as well. So we have Ross 308, which is one of the breeds of broiler that we have. Ross 308 is a brand of broiler that actually grows very fast in 6 weeks. So, and their growth rate is actually very fantastic. You see them to have a very stout body. They are not very tall, but when you weigh them, you discover that they actually have a very good weight turnover. They are also their feed conversion ratio is also very, very good. And then we discovered over the years, based on experience, that because of their fast growth rate, they do not actually like heat. So if you are brooding, or if you are raising this breed of birds, you have to provide them with a very suitable environment. If you need best result, you have to give them a very suitable environment, devoid of excessive heat, an environment that does not have excessive heat, an environment that has good ventilation, an environment that does not give them too much stress. So, and also when you are raising these birds, especially during periods like this, you have to ensure that you avoid everything that will actually stress them. So these birds are very good birds. They have a very good feed conversion ratio, like I told you. The second breed is COP 500. COP 500 is also one of the breeds of broiler that we have in Nigeria. They also have a very good feed conversion ratio, and they also grow well in 6 weeks and even beyond 6 weeks. So if you are intending to raise your birds beyond 6 weeks, you can actually look into keeping or raising this breed of broiler, COP 500. And to some extent, based on our experience, we also discovered that they are actually very good heat tolerant breed of birds, because if you raise them during a heat period, they actually tend to manage this heat seasons properly. But that does not also mean that because they are heat tolerant birds, you should leave them in a very, very hot environment. I believe that even us as humans, when the heat is excessive, we tend to actually dislike it. So no breed of broiler actually likes too much heat, but some of them are just a bit heat tolerant than the other ones. So, like I mentioned, COP 500 are actually actually one of those breeds that are a bit heat tolerant. But that does not also mean that you should not provide them with conducive environment. So, any breed of broiler you're actually keeping, you have to ensure that you provide them with a very, very conducive environment. Ensure that ventilation is optimum, and also provide them with feed and water at the necessary time. So we also have Arbor Acre Plus. This is also another breed of broiler, which is also very good. It also has a very good conversion ratio. Also grow well in a very short period of time as well. There are also breed of broiler that grow a bit tall. You see them; they are a bit taller than Ross 308 and Cop 500. And you also discover that they are like a little bit mix of the two. They can withstand heat period. They can also tend to manage cold season as well. So we also have Marshall. Marshall is not very common, especially in our environment here in Kaduna, but it's also one of the breeds of broiler that we have. Most times, Marshall is kept for longer production. If you want to raise birds for 8 weeks, probably, or 7 weeks, we discovered that these birds are actually better for that kind of production plan because they grow tall. You see them; they are actually very tall and giant by look. So those are some of the breed of broilers that we have. So it is important that you do your selection properly based on the circle you are looking into. If you want to raise your birds for 5 weeks, if you want to raise your birds for 6 weeks, which is most advisable for you, so that you can be able to actually have more production cycle in a year. Because if you keep birds for longer period, you discover that you are actually keeping them and you are eating part of the time that you're supposed to actually should have start raising the next batch of birds. So if you raise birds for 5 weeks, you discover that you tend to do more production cycle in a year, and that will also increase the production margin that you're supposed to have. And like right now with us, Blues Africa, the market problems that most of our farmers usually have is no longer there. So once you raise your birds for 5 weeks and they are expectedly more than 2 weeks of, 2 kg of weight, you can easily call us to come and actually take your best. And I know you all know that our payment is very fast. You're going to receive your payment within 24 hours, and we're going to encourage you to clean your pen, prepare for the next batch immediately. Because our interest is for you to actually do as many circle as possible, so that you can be able to make as much profit as possible at the end of the year. So one key thing that I also want us to look at is when you are after taking your birds a day old, uh, when your chicks arrive, what are the things you're supposed to do? So chicks arrival is one of the important aspects we're actually supposed to look at. And this is very critical because we discovered that sometimes farmers make a lot of mistake in this aspect. When you go to your vendor, we always advise that when you collect your birds, you bring them, make sure you take the weight of the birds from day old. It is very, very critical. Taking the weight from day old is very, very critical because a very good broiler bird at day old is not supposed to be less than 40 grams of weight. So sometimes you see 45, sometimes you see 48, sometimes you see 42. That gives you an insight that the birds you actually got is of good breed, and it was actually from a very good hatchery. So it is very important that please, when you buy your birds, when you bring them, you're supposed to take the weight as a day old. And I cannot overemphasize the importance of actually taking average weight. You're supposed to take the average weight as day old, and it's also supposed to be one of your activities while you are raising your birds, because this will give you an insight about how your production is actually going. So it is very important that you take average weight. Like I mentioned, it is not supposed to be less than 40 grams as a day old. Now, when you bring in your birds, you've already prepared your brooding house, like I showed you earlier. And when you bring them in, we know we're supposed to mix glucose for them in water, and then arrange your drinkers. So do not, like I always advise our farmers, do not mix your glucose before going to pick up your birds, because sometimes the vendors might disappoint you. So go and pick up your birds, bring them to your farm before you now mix your glucose. Now, immediately you mix your glucose and you arrange them inside your pen, make sure that you don't just carry this carton and pour these birds inside. Pick them, you're supposed to count them. While you are counting, make sure you are counting them around the drinker. You can see this drinker here, right? Make sure you are counting them around the drinker, so that as you are bringing them out of the carton, these chicks used to travel a very long distance, and they come already stressed. So what you're supposed to do is, as you're removing them from the carton, you are removing them and you are bringing them and you're counting them around your drinker. You can see this drinker here. So you go to one of the drinkers. If you buy two cartons, for instance, you can count 25 here, or you can count 15 here. You go here, you count another 15. You go here, you count another 15. You keep dropping them close to the drinker with this glucose that has already been mixed inside the water, so that as immediately you are dropping them, they will have direct access to this water, so that this glucose will give them a very sharp energy and it will help them in stabilizing quickly, because chick stabilization is very, very important. Most of these chicks used to travel sometimes for almost 24 hours before they get to you. And you realize that even as human, if you travel, for example, if you travel from Ibadan packed in a carton to Kaduna or to Zaria or to Saminaka, or from to anywhere that you are actually keeping your birds, you realize that you yourself, you're going to be very, very tired compared to chicks that are very, very small. So they actually come very tired. So that's one of the essence of you actually removing them and counting them around the drinker, so that they can it will help you in stabilizing them faster. And then I also discovered that one mistake our farmers used to make is, you can see the water inside this drinker. You can see that it is around the quarter level. Sometimes when our farmers mix their glucose, they tend to fill the drinker, and that is a wrong practice, because when you fill the drinker and you fill the feeder, you will realize that it will take them almost 24 hours before they finish that water, because they are chicks, and at that level, their drinking capacity is not as much as you are thinking. So you're supposed to give them the quarter level of your drinker. So when you mix this glucose for them, give them quarter level of your drinker, so that they should be able to finish this water within probably 3 hours. Then when they are done, you can now be able to mix multivitamin and their first shot of antibiotic. And also one important thing you're supposed to know when your chicks arrive, you're not supposed to give them feed first. It is very, very important to note. Do not give them feed first. You're supposed to actually give them water in glucose first, because this glucose is also containing, sorry, this water contains glucose, which is also sugar, and that sugar would give them their first shot of energy, and it will also help them to stabilize, like I rightly mentioned to you. So you are not supposed to give them uh, uh, you're not supposed to actually give them. Thank you so much. I can see your comments. You're not supposed to give them feed first. You're supposed to actually give them water first before you mix this glucose. And like I told you, please do not fill the drinkers. Do not fill the feeders on the first few days. You're supposed to give them small quantity, quarter level of the drinker, and also, and a day old. When you are using tray drinkers, you can also pour a little quantity on it. Also, one very important thing I also want to tell you is, when you are using tray feeders, when you pour feed on it, please make sure you mix the feed. You mix it properly. And after feeding for about an hour or two, go back and also mix the feed, turn it and mix it properly, because this also helps them. This helps improve their feeding level as well. So, okay, I'll be answering questions after this session. I can see one of the please, you can write down your questions as well. So, like I told you, when you fill your feeders, I've had many times farmers will say, doctor, my chickens are not finishing their feed. They have refused to eat the feed that I gave them. When you feed your, when you actually fill your feeders to the brim, you realize that once they eat it some for some time, they become tired of that feed. And that is why you're not supposed to feed their feeders at that time, because their eating capacity is not as much as you think. Because even us as humans, if they give you rice now and they carry maybe a very, very big pot and they pour plenty rice inside, when you eat it small, tomorrow you will not be able to eat that rice again because it would have spoiled. So it is the same thing for chicks as well. They will not want to eat stale food. So you're supposed to be giving them fresh food at all times. And it is also critical to understand that after you give them this glucose and you remove it, after probably 2 to 3 hours, when they finish drinking your glucose, you're supposed to give them their first shot of antibiotic and multivitamin mixed together. You can see in this picture, you can see the mixture here. So when you give them that shot, you're also supposed to be very, very observant at this level. Let me tell you why you need to be very, very observant. You need to be very observant because sometimes some of the chicks might be very weak. Even if they have taken this shot of glucose, they will still be very weak. You are supposed to make sure you separate those weak chicks, because sometimes we've had cases whereby farmers will just uh, bring their birds. After giving them feed and water, they will just go out and leave them. That very few days is very, very critical. You have to look at every corner of your pen. You have to look at every angle of your pen to make sure that you look at all these birds and ensure that they are actually in good state. Those ones that are not very strong, separate them, put them in one side. You can use a syringe, draw this glucose, water in glucose, glucose in water, sorry, and then you can actually assist them and to drink this water. It will help them in stabilizing. They are weak does not mean they cannot survive. Sometimes farmers give up quickly. So please do not give up on them, because I always say that I do not like to see a bird die. Maybe because I'm a doctor, I'm a vet doctor, it pains me when I see any single bird die, and I don't want you to lose any birds. And that's one of the reasons why we are here. So you have to make sure that every single of your chick, every single of your bird survives throughout. And one of the reasons why you should do that is because we're looking at ways for you to maximize profit. From day old, every single bird you lose is also part of your loss, because we all know that now a day old is around 1,000 naira. So when one died, it means you have lost 1,000 naira, which is something we don't want you to experience. So you have to be very, very observant. You have to make sure that your birds are actually active. Those ones that are not very active, you have to provide them with tender, loving care for a couple of days. You will see that they will definitely bounce back, and then you put them back with the remaining flock. Now, after that, it is very important to note that the first few days, brooding period is a very, very is an important period. Most time I advise farmers that you cannot sleep in this period, because whatever you do determines how the ending will be of your cycle. Because if you do not brood your birds well, you might have some certain level of challenges in the long run. So thank you so much. I can see comment sections. Thank you so much. Early care is actually very necessary, because these birds, they are chicks, and unlike our local chickens that have mothers that will take care of them, when they are cold they enter the body of the mother. When they are looking for food, the mother look for food for them and give them. When they are in distress, the mother actually tend to, you will realize that local chickens, if you try to take any of the chicks, the mother will fight you. Now you are the mother, you're the father of this chick, so you need to actually give them tender, loving care. You have to always be there for them, just like our babies as well. So I've talked about this stress related transportation, how you're supposed to actually give them tender, loving care when they arrive, and also the potential weakness that you will see, that some of them are actually going to be very weak when they arrive. You do not give up on them. You're supposed to separate them, you're supposed to give them the necessary care. You will see that they are actually going to survive. And in the long run, that bird that you might be thinking of giving up on might grow up to become the biggest bird in your pen. So please don't give up on any of them. Now, regulating temperature, which is very, very critical, which is an important aspect of brooding. Because during brooding period, brooding simply means you providing a suitable environment for them. Because at this stage, they are chicks. They don't have feathers on their body. So you have to actually provide a suitable environment for them. And this period is very, very critical, because sometimes farmers tend to become uh, weak, especially in the night, because we know that the temperature is cooler at night and early mornings. So at this period in time, you have to make sure that you are awake at all times. You have to make sure that you provide them with the necessary care by regulating temperature. And if you can see in this picture here, you can see here the yellow dot you are seeing is actually the birds, and they are all gathering around the heat source, which is showing that the birds are actually cold. It is showing that. So when you have a heat source in your pen, and you discover that your birds are actually gathering around that source, that place that you're actually heating up, uh, your the source of your heat, you realize that that shows to you that those birds are cold. Sometimes I've also seen whereby farmers would demarcate and be heating outside the demarcation, which means the source of the heat is not inside where the birds are. In these situations, you will now discover that the birds are actually by the wall of your pen. They will go and gather by the wall of your pen. They will be clustering together, they will be gathering together because they are cold. So situations like that, you need to quickly heat up the pen. You need to quickly provide optimum temperature for them. You have to regulate quickly. Thank you so much. You have to make sure that you regulate quickly. So also, when you discover that your birds are raising their feathers, they are raising their feathers like this, and they are panting, which means they are breathing from their mouth. It means the heat you have provided for them is too much at that time. It means they are actually hot. So the temperature is actually too hot at that time. So that is why we said brooding is for you to provide them with the appropriate temperature, regulated temperature, the one that is not too hot and is not too cold. So when it is too cold, you're supposed to know as a very good farmer. When it is too hot, you're supposed to know. And that is why I'm explaining to you, when it is too cold, how do you know? You will see that they are actually gathering around where the fire is. Or if the fire is not inside where they are, you will see them by the wall. They will be gathering around the wall, and they will be gathering and clustering together. That shows to you that they are too cold. And when you see them running away from the source of heat, and they are raising their feathers, and they are panting, and they are breathing from their mouth, it also shows to you that they are too hot. So what you are supposed to do at that time is to reduce the heat source and also open up your windows to improve ventilation so that the temperature can drop a little. So you can also see here that the birds are moving towards one side. So sometimes we've also seen situations where it is not too hot, it is not too cold, but the temperature is not even in the pen. Maybe only one side is hot, the other side is cold. Do we understand? So sometimes when you have situations like that, you will see that the birds will go towards one side where it is warm. When you go to the other side they are running from, you discover that that place is actually too cold. And then the problem with that is sometimes when they gather too much in one side, it brings about stampede. You see that they will start stepping on each other, and then some of them will die and suffocate in that process. So what you want is to see, if you can see this image here, you see them scattered all around. You see them scattered all around. You also see them that they are active. So when your temperature is okay, you see that your birds are scattered all around. They are in all the corners of the pen, and they are active. They are running around sharply. And you yourself, you know that yes, these guys are doing very okay and they are happy with what I'm giving them. So you need to regulate temperature. And I know we all know that. We always advise our farmers that for it to be easy for you, you need to actually get an environmental thermometer. And I think let me see, I think I have a picture of the thermometer here. You can see it here. You can get this thermometer and hang it. When you hang it in your pen, you will be able to be you'll be able to read the temperature of your immediate environment, which is inside the pen. It will give you an insight of what that pen is actually reading at that time. So this will simplify your brooding, and it will also help you in getting things right appropriately. And we can all see this is a chart of temperature of the necessary temperature you're supposed to actually provide to your birds, and also using this thermometer to be able to read this temperature for you. Okay, you can get this thermometer in any vet shop. You can ask them, and they should be able to get it for you. They call it HTC1 thermometer. It's very good. for you. It is also digital, so it is easy to read. You can see here the one on the image is 18.7 degree Celsius. So, but we know that when you are brooding, you're supposed to maintain temperature of between 32 to 35 degrees Celsius, depending on weather conditions. So that is also part of the things I want to also enlighten our farmers about today. Sometimes some farmers make some certain mistakes when it comes to breeding. So when you are brooding, you have to be cautious of the environment, which means, sorry, the climatic condition at that time. If we're inside heat period, you should be cautious. You cannot provide them temperatures that are of extreme nature when it is during heat period. In fact, when the temperature is naturally hot outside, you don't have to provide them any form of heat at all. You will see, if you have a thermometer like this, you will see that the thermometer will be reading to you that the temperature is already at the appropriate level or probably even beyond it. So you don't have to provide any heat at that time. And also, when it is heat period, you discover that the kind of cold we used to get in the morning, it is not as cold as the one we used to get during cold period. So when you are brooding during cold period, you have to make sure that you provide them more heat, so that, because one thing I discovered that from experience, during cold period, during Hamatan period, heat tend to escape faster. So when you are brooding during cold period, you have to make sure that you regulate this heat. You have to continue to provide them with this heat at all times, so that if you actually provide them heat at some point and then you leave the place, you discover that during cold period the heat will escape very fast because even the environment outside is colder. So that is one of the things that we need to also be cautious during brooding period, because sometimes some farmers, this brooding period is not forever. You have to put a lot of effort for your own pocket, because if you don't brood well, your pocket might not be as heavy as you might expect with. So they will use the energy that they are getting, the benefits, instead of to add weight. So you will now discover that have gotten have gotten to a certain weight, they are not getting there because they are growing more feathers than they are adding weight. Because they are trying to actually regulate the temperature by themselves because you have not provided them with temperature that is good enough. So that is one of the very, very uh, important aspect of brooding. So during brooding period, what I always advise farmers, because I've heard many times farmers will tell me, doctor, it's very difficult. I can't, I need to sleep. I need to do this. I need to do that. So, but what you will do, what I always advise farmers, and this is my own practice that I'm telling you my secret now. So let me tell you my secret. What I usually do is you target the colder part of the night. For instance, right now, since if it is during heat period, you will discover that the coldest part of the night starts from 11:12 a.m. in the night. So when you provide them heat from, let's say, 7 8 p.m., you should go and get some sleep, get some rest. Then you set an alarm. You will discover that because it's heat period, that heat will be able to maintain them for some certain level. Now, you will now focus on the coldest part of the day in the night when it is very cold. So that is the time you will not, because you've already gotten some sleep between 8 to 12 a.m., 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. Then when you wake up, you will now provide them this constant care, this regulated temperature, because that is the coldest part of the night. Do we understand? So, because if you now say, oh, you only provide them heat till 12 a.m., it will not help because you have not provided them the care when they need it the most. Because when they need it the most is the coldest part of the night and early mornings, so that around 5 a.m. you discover that it's actually colder at that time. So those are the time you're actually supposed to put a lot of effort in heating up your room to making sure that temperature is well regulated. The same thing, if it is cold period as well, you have to focus on the coldest part of the night to put a lot of effort in brooding these chicks, because like I told you, the foundation is key. If you don't brood well, the ending part is not good. So you have to make sure that you actually do the right thing during brooding period. Excuse me, sorry. So brooding is actually very critical for you to to also know that that level of in time. Now, if you have done your regulated temperature, your birds have grown, you have given them the tender loving care that they require. I also discovered something which is mistake, especially during this heat period. Thank you so much, Madam Rachel. Uh, when you are brooding during heat period, you're supposed to brood for 2 weeks, because after 2 weeks, you discover that temperature enough for them to manage. Because sometimes farmers tend to make a mistake after brooding period, which have a brooding house, they will continue to leave them inside that brooding maybe 3 weeks or even more than, and you discover that one they become over getting enough ventilation. So when you are brooding, if you have a brooding house separate from your rearing house, you discover that immediately after these 2 weeks, after this, to a more conducive house, especially during heat. Sometimes for those of us that brood in one pen and raise your birds in a single pen, when you finish brooding, you see that trampoline that you used to drop, raise it up. Sometimes farmers will say, will forget, or they would think maybe, oh, it is no longer, it is not really necessary. Or some of them will just raise it halfway and say, let the air be coming small, small. No, at that time, okay. So at that time, uh, uh, birds do not require heat anymore. What they require is very, very, very good means of ventilation. Because especially, like I said, especially during heat period. So once you are done with brooding, raise this trampoline up. Let fresh air enter these birds. Let them enjoy it. They will even pray for you. But sometimes farmers make mistake. They will raise it halfway and say, okay, I've finished brooding, but let me just be raising it halfway. No. Once you are done with brooding, you provide them optimum, you maintain a very good environmental condition for them, because they need fresh air at that time. So after that, you are done with brooding. You have done a very good job, because from what I explained now, in fact, not just about brooding, I think I started from the beginning. Let me just give us a recap of what we've discussed today. Pen preparation, we've discussed pen preparation before your chicks arrive. How are you supposed to prepare your pen? We talked about dry cleaning, wet cleaning, disinfection, dry cleaning, you making sure that you scrape all the dry manure, and also sweeping and dusting everywhere, wet cleaning, and also I mentioned that all the holes, all the openings that you have in your pen, either from the roof or from the floor, make sure you cover it at that time. And also, if your trampoline is torn or is bad, that is the time you're supposed to fix it during dry cleaning. When you are done, you do wet cleaning, where you mix disinfectant with hypo in water, and then you wash your entire pen. Then you do disinfection using a disinfectant. Like I mentioned, we have different type of disinfectant. We have Modigal Lysol, we have Vinco Quad, we have Vinco Kill. And also after that, you're supposed to use wood shavings, which is one of the best bedding materials, because sawdust is actually dusty and it might give your birds respiratory problem. So after putting your wood shavings, you're supposed to put newspaper or brooding paper or carton on top of the wood shavings. So that is how you prepare your pen. That is just a very small, a small summary of what we discussed during pen preparation. I also discussed brooding. When your chicks arrive, you're supposed to give them glucose in water. You're supposed to also count them out of the carton around your drinker, so that they will be able to have access to uh, that glucose quickly as they are coming out of the carton. Because most of them, most times, we know they have traveled a long period. I'm doing this recap for those of us that joined late, so that they will understand what we've discussed so far. So after that, you're also supposed to, we also talked about breed selection. We have COP 500, we have Ross 308, we have Marshall, we have Aboika. And we also talked about their characteristics as well. So we also talked about brooding, what you're supposed to do during brooding, maintaining and regulating uh, optimum temperature for your birds, which is very critical because, like I mentioned, one of the very, very important reason why we are supposed to do this brooding properly. You're supposed to you're supposed to do this brooding because if you do not brood your chicks properly, they will use the energy they are getting from the feed to grow feathers instead of adding weight. Now, after this period, you have done everything right. The next thing is the rearing period, which is where you're supposed to actually manage the best post brooding. Because if you have done brooding right and you don't do the right thing after this period, you discover that you might also face one or two challenges. One of it is to ensure that you do a proper feeding, you maintain a a proper feeding technique. And one of it is, I discovered most of our farmers either forget or don't tend to give attention to raising their feeders up. Because as your birds are growing, you know they are growing taller. So in the beginning, you might have kept their feeder or their drinker on the floor because they are day old at that time. So when they are day old, if you keep this feeder or drinker on the floor, as they are growing, you're supposed to be raising it to their chest level. You can see this bird here. You can see that the feeder here is at the chest level of the bird. Can you see that? You can see this one, an adult bird. You can see the feeder is at the chest level. So while your birds are growing, you're supposed to be raising their feeders to this chest level. The reason why you should do this is because it helps them to feed properly. Because if, for instance, you don't raise it, they will have to be sitting on the floor to feed, and that is not very convenient. That could be a discouraging factor for them to feed. Because when they feed a little and they get tired, because probably their legs or their knuckles are painful, they tend to stand up and then they will leave the feed. So you have to provide them a very, very feeding comfortable, comfortable feeding system, such a way that they are very comfortable while feeding. Because even us as humans, if you are feeding and you are not very comfortable feeding, you will not enjoy eating that food. So you're supposed to be raising their feeders to their chest level so that they will find it convenient to eat. Sometimes, if you don't raise this feeder to this level and they are sitting down or lying down while feeding, it tends to give them injuries on their legs, on their knuckles. You discover that because of excessive lying down or excessive struggle. Because sometimes, when you give them feed, they tend to come and struggle and then try to find a way to also feed. So it also results in one injury or the other in that system. Another reason why you need to also be raising their feeder is it reduces feed wastage. I know if you remember, I mentioned in the beginning that one of our aim is to make sure you maximize profit. Part of the ways you can maximize profit is if you do not waste feed. If you waste feed, you will discover that you have fed them more than expected and they have not returned the required weight because most of the feed might have poured on the floor and is inside the manure. And then we don't want you to actually inculcate that kind of practice. So one of the ways for you to avoid feed wastage is you raising this feeder. Because if the feeder is on the floor, you will discover that they will be using their legs to actually pour the feed away, which is one of the natural habits of chickens. Even the local ones, okay, I'll be going through your questions and I'll be responding to them. Even the local ones actually have that habit as well. So you have to be raising their feeders while they are growing because it helps them, give them a comfortable feeding condition, and also reduces feed wastage and also avoid unnecessary injuries. One other thing you need to also do, because I've discovered this is a critical aspect. Most of our farmers uh, do not actually follow uh, feed chart. So it is very important for you as a broiler farmer to follow a feed chart because a feed chart will tell you the quantity of feed you're supposed to actually feed your birds at a certain period of time. For maybe for the first week, you're supposed to give them this quantity of feed. Now, aside that, this feeding chart will also tell you that when you give them this quantity of feed, they are supposed to return this weight for you. For example, if you give them 2 bags of feed, as an example, they're supposed to give you 500 grams of weight. So if you have given them these 2 bags of feed and then you take your average weight and you discover that you're not getting the required weight, you should know that something is wrong. So that is one of the essence of following this feeding chart. Or if you take your average weight probably at 2 weeks or at 3 weeks and you are seeing that the average weight is not actually up to standard, you also discover that probably the feed you have been giving them is not up to standard. which means you are not been feeding them well. So you need to know the quantity of feed that is required for your birds. And that is one of the reasons why you need to sign up on our app, because when you sign up on our app, all these records will be easy for you to manage. Because when you sign up on our app, and the link will be dropped for you on the chat box, for those of us that have not signed up yet, you will be able to actually manage your production cycle easily. The feed, you can be able to get calculation of your feed. You can be able to actually get information about all the record that you're supposed to keep for your birds, the vaccination, the medication schedule and chart. You also find it there. It also helps you keep updates about your feed conversion ratio, because following up with your feed conversion ratio would also, okay, you can see the link there on the chat box. You can sign up on our app to find it easy to manage some of these things that I'm talking about, your feed chart, your vaccination, and other record. So you also discover that it helps you monitor your feed conversion ratio, because your feed conversion ratio will tell you how your production cycle is going, because it is it will not help you in maximizing profit if you're actually feeding your birds and they are not returning the appropriate weight. You will now discover that, oh, at 5 weeks you fed them so number of bags and they have not given you the required weight of a standard required weight, and that will now affect your profit margin, because at the end of the day you discover that you spend so much money on feed, and then the weight that you're actually getting is not up to standard. So it is very, very important for you to make sure that you keep record of all these things that you're actually doing. And when you sign up on our app, it will help you to actually do that. So it is very important for you to follow up on this feeding chart to be able to know the quantity of feed you're supposed to give your 50 birds, your 100 birds, your 200 birds that you have actually kept, and also follow up with the chart, the weight gain as well. And that also brings us to you understanding how important it is to take average weight. Taking average weight is very, very critical. Like I told you, when you bring your birds as a day old, you're supposed to take their weight as a day old. And like I told you, as a day old, they are not supposed to be less than 40 grams. After 1 week, you're supposed to actually be taking your average weight every week, because this will give you an insight that, oh, now I'm at 4 weeks. This is the standard weight, which you will see on our app. That this is actually the standard weight as at 4 weeks. But are my best at 4 weeks, my best that are 4 weeks old, are they at that weight? Have they attained that standard weight? The only way for you to know is when you take average weight. And you can take your average weight using a weighing scale. We also have a weighing scale that we sell is 4,500. You can call our customer care to actually order for this weighing scale. You can also speak with your cluster leader if you need one, so that you can liaise with your cluster leader to actually get this weighing scale for you. This weighing scale is very easy to use. It is digital. You just need to use your battery, and then when you put in your battery, it brings out the numbers, and then you'll be able to take your weight easily. And now, how do you take your average weight? For example, at week 7, sorry, at day 7, you want to take your average weight. Thank you so much for that comment from UK. I appreciate that. So at for example, at week 1, you want to take your average weight. You have a weighing scale like our own, digital, very easy to use. Uh, you are supposed to select your bets randomly. When you hang, our weighing scale is the hanging type. When you hang your weighing scale, you get probably a bucket or something you can hang on the weighing scale. And then first thing, it will show you the weight of the bucket or the weight of the pan or whatever material that you use to put your bets inside. Then you press the button tar, and then after that, now the most critical and the most important part is when you are taking average weight, it is very important for you to know that you're supposed to select these bets randomly, because sometimes we've had issues with some of our farmers where they will say, we'll ask, have you taken average weight? They will say, yes. You've taken average weight. What is it telling you? They will say, my bets are now 1.8 kg averagely, or they are 2.4 kg averagely. But when we go there, we discover that it is not actually up to 2.4 kg. And where did this farmer make this mistake? Sometimes farmers, when they want to take average weight, out of 50, they will only pick 2 or 3 and weigh them. and that gives them the average. No, that will not give you the average weight of that flock. That is one. The second mistake is we also discovered that some of our farmers, if they want to take average weight, they will select the big ones. They will go to the big one. They will look. In fact, they will target a certain big one, catch it, and then go and weigh. Maybe out of 50, they will select the two biggest ones and take their weight and say, okay, that's the average weight. No, that's not the average. That's not how you take your average weight. If you want to take your average weight, you are supposed to actually sample the birds, take randomly from each corner. Take randomly. You can take anyone that your eyes see, whether it's small or big, just pick it. Take the weight. So if you have 50 birds, you're supposed to weigh at least 15 of them. So when you weigh the first bird, you write the weight down. You weigh the second one, you write the weight down. You weigh the third one, you write the weight down until you get to 15. And you are going to be picking them randomly from all the corners of your pen. Any bird that you like, anyone that comes to your eyes, you just pick. Now, when you finish taking this weight, you will now add up all the weight together, all these 15. You plus it all together. When you add it up all together, you will now divide it by 15 because you weighed 15 birds. If you have time, you can weigh 20. If you weigh 20 birds, when you add it all up together, you will now divide it by 20. Whatever you get is your average weight. That will give you the real average weight of your flock. So whenever we call you, I will say, oh, what is the average weight of your birds? That is how you're supposed to actually take your average weight. And it is very important, like I told you, for every poultry farmer to okay, I'll be responding to questions one after the other. So, when it is very important for every poultry farmer to actually be taking average weight of their birds at all times. So, it is very critical for you to have a weighing scale and also get this thermometer, which will help you in taking the weight of your, sorry, taking give you an insight of the environmental temperature of your pen. So thank you so much. I hope we've been able to covered one or two things from the basic principles of poultry farming. In our next training, like I told you, we'll be having our next training, online training like this on the 31st of this month. Kindly join us and inform all of your cluster members to also join us as well, because we'll be discussing further some other key aspects of poultry farming that you might need to actually open your ears to gain more and more experience and more insight so that you can be able to maximize profit, reduce mortality, and also get it right in your poultry farming, because that is our ultimate interest. Like I also told you, you can sign up on our app. The link is on the comment section. You can also call our customer care number. It's also in the comment section if you need the weighing scale as well. And also, if you need any extension services from us as well. I also mentioned in the beginning that you can follow us on all social media platforms. On LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we are on Telegram, we are on Instagram as well, to get tips on some of these things that we've also discussed as well. Thank you so much for your time. I'll be taking your questions now uh, before we round up the program. So let me take this one. Habib Abakar, thank you for your question. She said, "Thank you very much, sir. We are so happy with this class. My question is that when you give them glucose for the first day, can I give them the following day?" Okay, thank you. Please, thank you so much for your question, Habiba. You're supposed to give them glucose only on the first day, because the essence of giving them that glucose is for them to have that quick surge of energy. You know, when they arrive, they're actually very tired. You understand? And like I said, you're not supposed to give them feed first. You're supposed to give them water first. But that water should contain that glucose so that it will give them that energy to be able to stabilize them immediately because of that stress. You understand? So, and like I told you, you're supposed to give them the glucose like quarter level of your drinker. You're not supposed to fill the drinker so that they can be able to finish it maybe in 3 to 4 hours. So once they finish that, you don't need to give them that glucose again, because once they start feeding, they are actually going to get their feed, their energy, and other necessary nutritional value from that feed already. So you're supposed to give them glucose immediately they arrive, and then that is all. You're not supposed to actually give it to them the next day, because you're already giving them the feed. I hope that answers your question. Okay, another question here from Madam Diana David. Please, doctor, which breed attend 2 kg at 5 weeks with proper feeding? Actually, according to a feeding chart and also the weight chart, at 5 weeks you're supposed to get 2 kg from all of these breeds. If you use a very good feed, we know feed contributes to about 70% of the cost of production. And also, if you use a very good high quality feed, which I know most of our farmers know them based on experience, you're supposed to actually get more than that 2 kg as at 5 weeks. So any of this breed you use will actually give you that 2 kg at 5 weeks. But some of them actually grow faster than the other based on your experience. And like I told you, Ross 308 is actually one of the very good breeds based on my own experience. It grows very fast and actually gives you a very good feed conversion ratio. The same with Cobb, the same with Aboeka. All of them gives a very good result as well. What matters most is one, the kind of feed you are using, two, the kind of management practice that you inculcate, three, how did you manage them during brooding. So all of these play a role in ensuring that you get the targeted standard of weight that they are supposed to actually attain as at that 5 weeks. So I think that answers the question. Okay, I've been seeing a lot of questions about thermometer. You can get this thermometer at a veterinary store. When you go to where you buy your drugs, they should have it. They should have the thermometer. So they sell. You can just ask them a digital environmental thermometer. They should be able to get it for you. And probably we'll also try and look for those of us that are in Kaduna and in Zaria, we'll try to look for stores that have it, and we'll link you up with those stores. Probably will communicate that information with your cluster leaders so that you can be able to have access to where you can get this thermometer. I can see someone said it is very scarce. Yes, it might be scarce probably, but we'll try to see. I'll personally try to look at how I can speak with some of my colleagues, my veterinary colleagues, uh, to see the stores that we might be able to get them in Kaduna, in Nasarawa, and also in Zaria and other areas that we have our farmers stationed. Okay, somebody said, is there any way you can know if the space you have for the birds is okay to avoid congestion? You know, first thing is, aside your the normal way you can actually calculate your space, which we've discussed in some of our trainings. If you have a space, you can actually easily count the length and the breadth of the house. When you multiply it, it gives you the total number of birds that you're supposed to actually experience. When you look at your birds, if they are overcrowded, you are going to eat yourself. You will discover that the space provision that you've given them is actually too small. And sometimes, one mistake some of our farmers make also is, after when they are brooding, probably after brooding a couple of days, that space they cut out for birds during brooding, because sometimes some people actually use a smaller space for brooding. If congested in that space, you need to extend it. It is very critical, because overcrowding is actually very, very bad for your birds. So that is how you can actually calculate your space. And then you know that when you are brooding, you actually tend to give them a smaller space. So based on your own experience, visual examination is also very critical. You have to look at how crowded they are, so that you'll be able to manage that overcrowding. So when they are becoming overcrowded, you need to actually extend the space for them, especially during brooding period. Sometimes I've seen many cases whereby people cut out a very small space for them, and then in the long run, probably after a few days, sometimes 5 days, 7 days, the space becomes too small for them. So you tend to extend for the best as well. And also, if you give them too much space as well, you will discover that your birds will be exercising too much. when they are already big, when they have actually maybe 4 weeks upward, if they're exercising too much, they will also be burning too much fat, and then that might also affect their weight gain or their current weight that they have attained. Okay, thank you, Doctor. I'm proud of Police Africa. You're just great. Thank you so much for that comment. We appreciate. We're here for all of our farmers. Our interest is for you to be sustainable, to see that we are able to solve all of your problems, and then to see that you're actually able to maximize profit in your production cycle. Okay, okay. I'm trying to check through the questions. Okay, someone said, can we use watermelon in place of glucose? Yes, you can do that. Sometimes people give watermelon because it also has a high sugar level. And when you also eat it, you will discover that watermelon is also sweet to taste. So you can also do that. But if you don't, I think glucose is easier to get for me, and it is also cheaper, a cheaper alternative sometimes because a sachet of glucose is not very expensive. So you can also do that as well. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Another question. Can we use sorry, I skipped. Good evening. Somebody said, good evening, sir. I'm happy for this class. This glucose is for for the for all the day or 30 minutes. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, if you give them this glucose, you're supposed to give them you're not supposed to fill the drinkers, so you're supposed to give them what should last them for some hours, probably 2 to 3 hours, so that once they are a bit stabilized and they are done drinking that water, you can actually replace it with a multivitamin and feed, so that you can then remove the glucose. So you're supposed to give it to them once, and then you should give them enough quantity that should last them more than 30 minutes, because you're asking if it should be for just 30 minutes. So you should be able to last them for more than that period of time. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, somebody is asking if you can use honey. Yes, I've seen people. You can also use honey as well, because it is also sweet to taste in place of glucose. But like I mentioned to you, I think glucose is a cheaper alternative, so it is better you also look at the cost of your production while you are raising your birds as well. All right, all right. I think if you have any more question in the next 2 to 3 minutes before we round up, kindly drop your questions so we can respond to them. And I hope we've had a very wonderful learning session. Like I said, you can also join us in our next training session on 31st of this month. Okay, somebody said, I don't have any cluster. How do you fix me up? Please kindly call our customer care number. It is also in the comment section so that they can assist you in that regard. Yes, yes, yes. Hopefully, we're supposed to maintain the same time for next training. And if there's going to be any changes to that, we'll definitely communicate that to you as well. For the timing, the platform, and also the date. Thank you so much. Also, someone said, how can you assist small scale farmers? Okay, part of how we are assisting small scale farmers is is this training that we are having right now. Also, like I told you, we discovered that small scale farmers are having a lot of challenges. One of it is the challenge of market. You discover that they find it difficult to sell their chickens sometimes. And part of the ways we're actually assisting them is providing them this premium market, whereby at any point in time, you don't have to wait for Salah, you don't have to wait for Christmas, you don't have to wait for Easter before you raise your chickens. You can raise your chickens at any time, and then you'll be able to actually sell them. When you call us, we'll actually come and buy your best. And like I also mentioned to you, very, 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 very fantastic. We pay within 24 hours because we are encouraging you to make profit again. All right. So thank you. I appreciate I appreciate your time. Somebody, last question. How do I set the thermometer? Okay, how do you set or how do you get? Like I mentioned, okay, like I mentioned, you can get it from a veterinary store. And assist you in maybe linking up Nasarawa or anywhere we have link you up with those stores so that you can be able to get this thermometer. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all the comments and I hope I've been able to answer your questions. Thank you. See you next time we're having this session.